You don't have to say it like that.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we're gonna do.
It sounds so barbaric.
It's Pogue season again, as Outer Banks is streaming at #1 on Netflix. But as much as it pains me to say it, I have to be honest, Season 3 is not good. From the awful plot to the terrible character development, it's in fact downright terrible. First things first, let's talk about the plot. Season 3 of Outer Banks picks up where Season 2 left off, with the Pogues on the run from the law after stealing a bunch of gold. But instead of the high-stakes adventure we've come to expect from the show, we're given a slow-moving, convoluted mess of a plot. There are so many subplots and characters to keep track of that it's hard to even know what's going on half the time. And the worst part, none of it is interesting. The writers used to have an imagination before this season, but now it's like every other cliche treasure hunt, with the same goal: finding that lost city of gold. Heard of this one before, right? It's starting to feel less like a Netflix show and more like the game Uncharted, with a lack of consequences for the characters' actions. In the first 2 seasons, the Pogues had to deal with the consequences of their decisions, whether it be legal trouble or personal relationships.
Orders?
Wow.
Okay, John B., your turn. Truth or dare?
All right. Truth.
Truth?
Truth.
However, in Season 3, they seem to get away with their actions without any real repercussions. This makes the show feel less realistic and takes away from the stakes of the storyline. And as always, a bad plot is the result of terrible writing. The dialogue is clunky and often cringeworthy, with characters saying things that no real person would ever say. And don't even get me started on the attempts at humor. They fall completely flat and just come off as awkward and forced. But it isn't just the plot that seems underdeveloped. The characters fall flat. The Pogues, who were once a group of lovable misfits, have become unlikable and even downright annoying. John B., the show's protagonist, has turned into a caricature of himself, spouting off one-liners and making terrible decisions left and right. In the first 2 seasons, he was portrayed as a leader and someone who could keep his cool under pressure. However, in Season 3, he makes rash decisions that put himself and his friends in danger.
Regardez sur votre tablette, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, d'accord.
Merci.
This is a step backward for his character, and he isn't given the chance to develop further. Just like John B., Sarah Cameron, who was once a complex and interesting character, has been reduced to a love interest with no real agency or personality of her own. In Season 1, she was portrayed as a spoiled rich girl who was sheltered from the harsh realities of the world. However, as the show progressed, she began to see the world differently and became more empathetic towards others. But again, in Season 3, she seems to have reverted to her old ways. It feels as if her character development has stagnated. And while we're on the topic of characters, let's talk about Wheezy Cameron, Sarah's younger sister. She's introduced in Season 3 and is meant to be a major player in the story, but instead of being a compelling addition to the cast, she's simply obnoxious and grating. And let's just forget about the show's new villain, Carlos Singh. He's one-dimensional, cartoonish, and completely uninteresting. Although Carlos Singh, played by Andy McQueen, seems ideal on paper, he's barely a match for the villains of old, especially Ward Cameron.
I've almost got the new papers ready, you know? Passports, bank accounts. I got this.
I like the Mad Dog part.
Just put that back. Put it back. Be cool.
This villain is one of the worst in Outer Banks history, thanks to how he's portrayed as well as how his personality is structured. Another character who's a major problem for the show is none other than John B.'s long-lost father, Big John, while the audience is left in awe at their reunion. Big John is a terrible addition to the plot, as all he ends up doing is splitting apart the Pogues, one of the main reasons people watch the show. His return also undermines the emotional weight of his death in the first season. When John B.'s father figure was believed to be dead, it was a significant turning point for the show and its characters. It gave John B. a motivation to seek the treasure and find a way out of his difficult circumstances. Bringing Big John back cheapens the impact of his death and undermines the character development that occurred in the first season, and his return seems to come out of nowhere and lacks proper explanation. His reappearance isn't adequately explained, and it feels like a convenient plot device rather than a well-thought-out decision.
What was that?
Amazing. A text from our friend Jimmy Portis.
Season 3 already has a lot of plot lines and new characters to introduce, and bringing back a supposedly dead character only adds unnecessary complications. It also feels like a lazy attempt to create drama and tension rather than a meaningful addition to the story. So, what went wrong with Season 3? It's hard to say for sure, but there are a few things that stand out. For one, it feels like the showrunners were trying to cram too much into the season. There are so many new characters and subplots introduced that it's hard to keep track of them all. That's not all though. It seems like the show is trying too hard to be edgy and cool, with characters spouting off pop culture references left and right. But instead of feeling fresh and fun, it just comes off as try hard and forced. You would think the problems end there, but no, they don't. Another issue with Season 3 is the lack of focus. The show seems to be trying to do too many things at once, with the Pogues trying to outrun the law, find hidden treasure, and uncover a massive conspiracy all at the same time. It's too much to keep track of, and none of it is given the time or attention it deserves. It's like there's 3 different versions of the show playing on the same screen at the same time. But perhaps the biggest problem with Season 3, for most people, is that it simply doesn't feel like Outer Banks anymore. The show that we fell in love with in the first season, with its sense of adventure, camaraderie, and heart that made us want to live that Pogue life, is nowhere to be found. Outer Banks Season 1 and 2 were thrilling and adventurous, with a healthy dose of romance and drama. The show was centered around a group of friends on a treasure hunt, and the stakes were high. But now we're left with a bloated, messy, and soulless shell of what once was a great show, as Season 3 took a darker turn, with the plot focusing more on the Pogues' battle against the wealthy and powerful Ward family. While the show has dealt with class and power struggles, the focus on politics and corruption in Season 3 felt like a departure from the original premise. Now, I know that there are going to be people who disagree with me on this.
Because of it, okay? So don't get that look when I say I'm a victim, all right? I am.
He's ready.
And that's okay, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. But for me, Season 3 of Outer Banks was a disappointment. The plot is convoluted, the writing is clunky, the characters are unlikable, and the show lacks the heart and soul that made it so special in the first place. While it's always tough to see a show you love take a nosedive, it's important to be honest about its flaws. And in the case of Outer Banks Season 3, there are just too many to ignore. While it pains me to say it, I don't think I'll be tuning in for a potential Season 4. So that's it for today's video. I'll see you in the next.